Start. This will be the committee meeting for today. Where is the agenda? Do we have an agenda? I don't see an agenda. We could have that, please. That belongs right there. May 8th, Audits and Government Efficiency Committee meeting.
No, I didn't. I left it in the...
Councilmember Zine, Chair. I'm here. Mr. Rosendahl is tied up in Budget and Finance. And Mr. Labange, we may expect, correct? Yes. I don't know. May appear later. So he's not here at this time. All right, so any recommendations will be recommendations on the items. We have 4 items on the schedule. We're going to connect number 2 and 3, and we are going to then start with number 1.
Item number 1, communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. David Green to the Quality and Productivity Commission for the term ending September 6, 2013.
Mr. Green here?
Yes, I am.
Take the hot seat, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Mr. David Green is here today. Mr. Council Member 15 was escorting you around council chambers.
Yes, Joe Buscaino.
Joe Buscaino, our newest member, introducing you, giving you praise and accolades for your fine work. So if you can just give a little information. Okay, before I vote, up or down?
Okay.
Thank you.
You mean background information or what I see in terms of the...
Both.
Okay. So in my career, I've been largely in information technology, but it's brought me into a number of different fields, including healthcare and finance and other things like that. I've had some training with quality assurance and ISO 9000, things along those lines. And then in terms of the commission itself is, obviously the city's facing real tests in terms of budget and other things, so productivity improvement is very, very important, and there may not be a lot of money to do things, but that just means we need to manage things a little bit smarter and a little more thoughtfully. When I spoke to you earlier today, you mentioned about quality, and I agree. I think that's very important. So many things in life, building things is one thing, maintaining them is another, and that's where a lot of things fall by the wayside. And so if quality is put in and built in initially, it's much easier to maintain things and to make things run more efficiently.
And we have a lot of problems with the quality of construction, et cetera. It doesn't maintain as it should for a long period of time. So quality and productivity, especially in these hard economic times, you need to get that quality product and be productive in what you're doing. And as you know, the shrinking budget has a big impact on that. And you're a resident of District 15 down in
San Pedro.
San Pedro. And you have a master's in business administration, so you're well educated for that, for the challenge that faces you.
Thank you.
And it will be a challenge. And you are replacing a resigning commissioner, the spot of Jamie Lee, who resigned. You'll join the other commissioners on that.
I did have a chance to attend last month's meeting, and the other commissioners I felt I got along with very well, and really looking forward to working with them. And I think we're going to kind of concentrate on just a few things to try to do a few things well and show that own quality within our own commission. Excellent.
All right, so we're going to recommend that go forward. Did they have a date in council for Mr. Green?
We have no fixed date. We're certainly flexible so long as it's completed by June 6th.
So your schedule, you can coordinate with the clerk's office, and then you'll go before the council for the full confirmation.
Oh, okay.
So we'll recommend to approve and then coordinate with the clerk's office the date that's convenient for you, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Friday. So all the council members will have an opportunity to hear from you and have the final vote.
Very good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
You're very welcome. Okay, that matters a recommendation for approval, and let's go to 2 and 3 then.
Okay, items number 2 is Controller Department of General Services and Los Angeles Police Department reports relative to an audit over controls of the city's fuel use. Subsequent to the agenda release, we also received reports from the Department of Housing, as well as Department of General Services and the Fire Department also. Those reports came in subsequent. For item number 3 is a motion signed Wesson relative to directing the GSD to report in regard to fuel use, to include a number of measures, and additionally, review of the Voyager card program, accessibility of Mastercards at each fuel use station, and recommended improvements.
Okay, the controller did an audit, and the audit showed huge expenditures and some major problems, so if we can have those folks come forward. And if you're here for the number 2 and 3, make yourself present. And the controller's office will begin.
Good afternoon. Rick Taguchi with the Office of Controller Auditing Division. Our audit report was issued on March 29th, and the objective of the audit was to assess controls in place to ensure that fuel purchased by the city was used only for authorized city purposes. The audit's findings and recommendations were based on reviews of processes and controls at 5 departments. They were LAPD, LAFD, Housing Department, the Convention Center, and Recreation and Parks. We also reviewed processes at GSD due to their centralized role in ordering the fuel, issuing fuel cards, maintaining a fuel automation report center, and working with vendors to resolve problems with fuel sites. So just to give you some background, the city purchases about 13.8 million gallons annually at a cost of about $29 million, and fuel is dispensed at 141 sites throughout the city. Now, there are several different methods to obtain fuel, or to dispense the fuel into city vehicles. First of all, there's what's referred to as the VIT system, which stands for Vehicle Information Transmitter. So the majority of vehicles purchased after 2003 have a transmitter whereby when you obtain gas, it automatically records the vehicle number and the odometer reading into a fuel transaction database. And then you have regular fuel cards. So these are cards that have a one-to-one association with the vehicle. So let's say someone found a card lying around. They wouldn't be able to get gas unless they typed in the exact 5-digit vehicle number corresponding to that card. So ideally,
you mean the shop number?
Sometimes they're referred to as shop numbers.
Okay.
So ideally, these are the 2 best methods to obtain the fuel because they're the lowest risk. Now, there's other methods that are higher risk. First of all, there's what's referred to as a Mastercard. Now, these cards are only supposed to be used when the VIT or the regular fuel card is not working or it's not available. So under the Mastercard, let's say a person found a card, they can easily use that card to get fuel in any vehicle because they can type any vehicle number. They can just look around, see a vehicle number, and just use that particular vehicle number and put the fuel into, let's say, their own personal vehicle. So those are a little bit higher risk transaction. And then there's a keypad entry method. This method's only used at LAPD sites. And it works similar to the Mastercards in that you can pretty much put in any vehicle number into the system. So it has the same level of risk as the Mastercards. And then the last method is the highest risk, which is referred to as the bypass mode. To get gas under the bypass mode, you flip a switch at a fuel control terminal, and the system doesn't record any vehicle number, doesn't require the user to enter a vehicle number, and it also doesn't record the department that the employee works for, nor does it record odometer readings. So those are the highest risk transactions. So overall, in looking at the database of 2 million transactions over a 2-year period, we found about 20% of transactions were through these higher risk methods. and those 20% accounted for $7 million in transactions. So even though the database for the majority of that $7 million has a vehicle number, there's no way to verify that those are actually the vehicles that receive the fuel. Okay, and then lastly, there's also Voyager cards, and those are used at commercial sites, commercial gas stations outside of the 141 city sites. So in summary, our audit found that departments generally do not monitor their fuel transactions to identify potential abuses or problems that require corrective action. As a result, the city cannot be assured that fuel use is being minimized and that inappropriate transactions are not taking place. Some of the specific findings of the report, first of all, with the exception of LAPD, departments do not utilize data available through the Fuel Automation Report Center to monitor their fuel use. So GSD developed a Fuel Automation Report Center whereby departments can access transactions. They can download the transactions, let's say, into Excel and do their own analysis. However, we found that except for LAPD, none of the departments had policies and procedures for reviewing those transactions. For example, none of the departments were aware of the bypass and Mastercard transactions occurring at their facilities. The departments were also unaware of the extent of negative mileage transactions and high mileage transactions. So what that is, a negative mileage transaction, let's say that last week you obtained fuel and you had an odometer reading of 50,000, and then today you go get gas and you put an odometer reading of 49,000. Well, that's considered negative. Yeah, so that's a negative transaction. So the system showed about 94,000 of those transactions. And then there's also what's referred to as a high mileage transactions, which is the exact opposite. So let's say you had an odometer reading of 50,000 last week and you go get gas for the very first time, and now you're putting in an odometer reading of 60,000. Well, how did you drive 10,000 miles, in 1 week without getting fuel? And there are 55,000 of those transactions.
55,000 of those?
Yes. Secondly, the city system for recording fuel transactions continues to produce errors. For example, we analyzed the database and we found about 1,400 duplicate transactions. So those are transactions where there's exactly the same transaction date, fuel site, number of gallons dispensed, pump number, department, and odometer reading. And again, as previously mentioned, there were those negative transactions and high mileage transactions. Now, according to GSD, there's certain circumstances where the system should be preventing those, but it appears that those edits are not always working. Next, departments do not conduct regular and documented physical inventories of fuel cards. These inventories are needed so that departments can account for all their their various fuel cards. And none of the departments conducted these regular inventories. For example, GSD's record showed that LACC had 47 cards, but when you go to LACC's records, they show 33 cards. And then going even further, of the 33 cards, LACC could not locate 6 of those cards. And then lastly, departments have not established policies and procedures with respect to checking out vehicles and maintaining trip logs. So, for example, housing did have policies requiring that certain vehicles be formally checked out and that vehicle logs be maintained. However, when we did test work, we found that for 45% of transactions, or I should say 45% of trips had not been logged into the manual log. So overall, we had 19 recommendations for improvement. Each of the 6 departments began taking actions to address many of these findings as they were brought to their attention during our field work. For example, prior to the audit report being issued, GSD began providing departments with reports of Voyager card transactions and bypass transactions, and each of the 5 departments began establishing policies and procedures for reviewing their fueling transactions. We recently received action plans from most of the departments, and within the next 2 weeks, we should have those formally evaluated.
Anything else?
No.
Who has the Mastercards?
Well, the Mastercards are generally assigned to at least one individual at each fuel site. So they're not, from my understanding, they're not supposed to carry those around. They're tied to the sites that have a fuel pump. So there should be at least about 141 of those Mastercards.
And have we ever analyzed to think, do we need 141 sites? Have we ever analyzed to say maybe we don't need to
Not as
have...
part of this audit. It might have been done as touched upon in another
I mean, the
audit.
city is large, but if you go to every single police station, they have fuel sites. Fire stations have fuel sites for diesel. Sanitation has fuel sites. I mean, there's a lot of fuel sites. I'm wondering why we have so many fuel sites, number one. When you say you have 141 fuel sites. We've never examined to see if we need that many. Go ahead, Angela.
Yeah, Renee V. Augustine with General Services. We do have a lot of fuel sites. We have about 140 fuel sites.
Well, we have 41 according to this. This one
yeah,
missing?
140, yeah. And so the Mastercard is premised on having that card in the event that somebody's unable to get fuel. So that's why the site supervisors are issued a Mastercard. So
have we ever done an accounting to make sure that we have 141 of those cards and not 141 are out floating around? Have we ever done an audit to see if we still have 141 cards in possession of who's supposed to have it?
well, when we issue the fuel cards, we actually have the Mastercards. We actually have a list of the sites of the supervisor who signed off for it and who we issued it to. We have that.
Yeah. When have we done an audit to make sure that they still have it, that it hasn't been lost, or hasn't been stolen, or hasn't disappeared? In other words, here's your card. Have we done any checks to make sure, years later, that they still have that card, or if that card hasn't been lost or stolen or misplaced or something?
Yes, there is a recommendation in the audit.
No. My question is, have we ever done an audit to see if someone still has that card that was issued originally? I don't know when it was issued, but have we ever done an audit to say, do we still have, those people still have those cards?
Angela Sherrick, Department of General Services. We haven't done an audit of it lately. Generally, what we do is rely on the departments. Because we actually issue them to a supervisor, and the supervisor has signed for them, if that card is lost, we expect that the supervisor will come back to us and tell us that the card is lost. With respect to your other question about the number of fuel sites that we have, the city had about 250 fuel sites probably about 10 years ago, and we actually consolidated sites. So we had a consultant come in and determine the number of fuel sites that we actually needed. So we actually reduced from 250 sites to 141 sites that we currently have.
So maybe it's time to reduce some more. I mean, I question why we have so many sites when you can share. I know the DOT, I see them at police stations. I, for one, gas my own car. I go to different sites, and the city car is gassed. And sometimes the mechanics are shocked the councilman's actually gassing his own car and washing his windows, but I do that. So I know the process. When you put that gasoline hose into the tank, and you've got that computer that clicks, and bam, there goes your gasoline. So supervisors come and go and retire,
Right.
so we should really look and see if 141 cards are still intact. I mean, part of the audit process that departments should do, excluding what the controller has to do, is to maintain control over whatever property they have. If you're with the police department, they check to make sure you still have your gun and you still have the equipment that's issued. They do an annual audit to make sure that in the division you have it. This is something, since we're talking about $7 million in missing fuel, we should maintain it from the bottom up. So general managers, through the process, fire, police, et cetera, whoever has that card, and I'm sure some of those folks are retired since those cards were issued, maybe that card is now misplaced. We don't know. Maybe someone took it and now they're using it for their own purpose, which obviously shouldn't be happening. But we should do an audit on that. As far as the VIT, which I find very effective, except sometimes there'll be a limit on how much gas you can put in a vehicle. And I've had that situation occur where you can't put it in, it won't take any more. It's like you used your allocation. which sometimes is a problem if you're traveling a lot. And I've had that situation, which I have to go get it increased. But when the problem that I have is that the audit's showing problems, and no one's really done anything to address it, and now we got to do backtrack to address to make sure it's done properly. Are you alleging anyone stole, put it in their own car, sold it, the black market?
No, we don't know that.
No, I know we don't know that, but is there any aspect of someone driving their own car in and putting gas in their own car? Because that mentioned to me from someone that, are city employees taking gas and putting their own cars?
The GSD may be able to speak to whether there's ongoing investigations. I think that a few years ago there were, and I think that even more recently there might have been some allegations.
Well, if that's the case, then that person should be brought up on criminal charges and probably fired if they're stealing. I mean, if you're stealing gasoline or stealing items from the city, you're a thief. We shouldn't be in a position of employing thieves. Do you know about situations like that?
The city has looked at and investigated with LAPD any allegations of theft. So we have worked with LAPD. Any allegations that we receive from a department or from any person that there are allegations, we have investigated those with LAPD.
Was there any sustained where they found that there was actually someone stealing gasoline?
There was one that was sustained that has been adjudicated.
What do they do with that person?
That person has been fired.
Okay, that's the appropriate discipline, is to terminate them. I mean, you can't tolerate thievery. It just doesn't. I don't think how the government can accept that. The fuel cards, the Voyager cards, how tightly are those regulated? Because like the fuel cards, 33, 47 is 33. See, the problem is that we issue things and we don't check to see if it's still there. And then we do an audit years later and find out, by the way, we got some holes in the system. If we were to do these audits periodically within the departments, we wouldn't have this problem in the first place. The controller would do an audit and say everything's in order, thank you very much, everybody's doing a great job. But what troubles me on this committee is that we keep on looking at these situations where general managers aren't doing what they're supposed to do to make sure things are done properly. Everything needs to be audited appropriately.
Councilman, with respect to the Voyager cards, we do issue the Voyager cards. We reissue the Voyager cards on the general services side every 2 years.
Now, do we ever do an audit on those to see if they're still within the person's possession?
Well, again, the assumption here is once we've issued it, that we give them the guidelines of the proper usage. We also send on a monthly basis their usage automatically. So the 2 years would be like a clean out of all the Voyager cards, and it would give the department heads the ability to either reapply or eliminate the card.
So at that 2-year point, they're all canceled.
Huh?
At the 2-year point, all of the cards are canceled and they have to be reissued.
Okay. And how many do we have issued now?
We have probably about 250. And the majority of those cards are to elected officials' offices or to departments that have to travel outside of the city. For instance, Rec and Parks has quite a few parks that are not in the city area. So a lot of those cards are issued to those types of employees, and also for compressed natural gas. We have some sweepers that we use Voyager cards for, and we also issue them to police and fire helicopters.
Okay, well, I can understand those. Does the controller found any problem with the Voyager cards, misuse or inappropriate use?
We did, again, find problems with the lack of physical inventories for those cards. We also found some situations where it appeared that there was a city site that could have been used instead of a commercial site.
Because when you're going to a city site, we're paying less per gallon than we are at a commercial site, correct?
Yes.
So we buy in bulk.
That's correct.
So maybe we should make a recommendation that the Voyager cards would be issued for 1 year and not 2 years, and expired after a year. At least that way we can keep control of it and wipe them all out. Then they have to go out and issue them again. At least that way we can keep track for a better period of time than 2 years. Okay, do the departments monitor high-risk transactions, including bypass transaction, keypad entry for LAPD, Mastercard, negative odometer, high mileage, after hours and weekends, and high volume? So do the departments do any particular monitoring? I know general services has to do what they need to do, But when you come to the other departments, housing and police and fire, et cetera, do they work in coordination with you folks to do any kind of monitoring, or is it just, there's the pump, there's the hose, there's the vehicle, take it away?
Well, we actually have a report center. GSD has provided a report center that the departments can access at any time. All they have to do is put in a vehicle number, they can put in a date range, and they can get all the information for that vehicle for that date range.
Do we know if they ever do that?
No, we don't know if they ever do that, but one of the recommendations, and something that GSD has done for about the last 4 years, is we have a biweekly meeting. So every 2 weeks, we actually meet with the vendor. And what we're doing, based on the controller's recommendations, is to encourage the departments to come to those meetings more often so we can have discussions such as you're bringing to light right now. The use of the report center and how to go through the monitoring process. So our next meeting is actually on Thursday, and we've invited all the departments to come so that we can reiterate how to use the report center and all the reports that we do send out. In addition to the report center, GSD actually sends out a number of reports on a monthly basis. The Voyager report, the bypass report, the negative transaction report, the Mastercard report. So those report, all of the issues that you just brought up, those are reports that we actually send to the departments. So in addition to that, we'll be having the meetings every 2 weeks that the departments can attend and again be briefed on how to use the system.
Okay, you say can attend. How many of them participate?
Right now, we probably have about 4 departments that attend on a regular basis, and we've are encouraging all the other departments. We just sent a letter out about a month ago alerting them to a meeting that we're having this Thursday that the departments can attend, that we will be going over this information again.
Okay, what you need to do is let this committee know what departments are not participating, and we will deal with the general managers of those departments to make sure they understand that they need to have some participation in that. Because it seems like you're trying to do your job. If you don't get the cooperation from other places, it doesn't seem to work as it's supposed to. Did more keypad entry transactions occur than the controller expected?
I would say yes.
So you can go to a facility that has the VIT and punch in a shop number and punch in a mileage and just make it up, and away you go on the override.
Yes.
So how do we correct that situation?
Well, again, through just monitoring, getting reports of transactions where that occurred and seeing if they were reasonable. We also had a recommendation related to having people put their badge number in, because these are LAPD sites, and GSD, I think, is currently exploring that option.
Well, everybody has a badge or employee number. I wouldn't use a social security number, but everyone has an employee number.
Well, I think actually our recommendation was to restrict that use only to police people, because the non-emergency personnel should not have the ability to use that keypad entry.
But DOT uses the gas pumps at the police stations. I've seen DOT vehicles in there gassing up. I've seen fire vehicles in there gassing up. Other people use it other than the police at the police stations.
The override feature is only for LAPD vehicles, so you cannot punch in a DOT vehicle and get fuel. It has to be an LAPD vehicle.
But they could go in there and they see a vehicle that's parked, they take that shop number and they put that shop number in the computer with mileage, and they'll get gas.
Well,
There's a simple override that's a problem.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we're looking at the serial number option, and we have discussed this with LAPD, and they are currently reviewing information that we have from our vendor to determine whether or not that's something they want to implement, because it would be just using a serial number. So it wouldn't be for other city employees, only for police department employees with a serial number.
Because at least that way you can keep control of it. And obviously, if there's $7 million in question, we have to do something to tighten it up. And why did the higher number of negative odometer and high mileage transactions occur? The higher number of negative odometer and high mileage transactions. People just making numbers up?
Some of those that is somewhat exacerbated by the bypass and the Mastercard, where a vehicle may have been using the may have used the Mastercard at one point, and then when they may have inputted a wrong odometer reading, and so when they properly fuel the vehicle with a VIT, that's when you see some of these negative odometers. It's mentioned also in the audit If vehicles are fueling with a tanker, obviously that's not the tanker trucks, that's not monitored in terms of fuel automation. So once they go out and fuel at a regular fueling station, they will get an over mileage situation. So a lot of that is exacerbated by the use of the bypasses, the Mastercards, and the override.
Because if they're going to use, and most of the police cars, I think, are equipped with the computer, if not all, and if they're on a hold harmless or some other type of vehicle that they're utilizing, there should be something other than the shop and the mileage, and as you say, the serial number would definitely be able to track it down to have if someone wants to do an audit, which they should do. Now, it used to be they have a person working the gas pumps, and they would then log it in on a piece of paper, the mileage and the shop number, and there would be a garage attendant that would do that. And when garage attendants went away, people would gas their own vehicles, and they would write on a piece of paper, and they'd drive off. And then we went to the VIT. How long has the VIT been in operation?
Probably about 2001, I think we first started installing them. I'm not sure when at PD. 1990.
1990?
99.
99? But that's first started to install. When did it get installed citywide?
We have
When did
about,
we convert
GSD has about 75% because we've started, anything older than 2003, we made the assumption that we'd be replacing those vehicles. So GSD has about 75% installed. I think Fire has about 20% installed. And PD has about 99%? 92% installed.
Okay. And then what, did the system alert users of negative odometer readings and high mileage transactions? Did the system say that or mention or some kickback to the person utilizing?
We are now providing the departments with automated reports to indicate when that has happened.
And hopefully they'll do something about it. Okay, what issues would the controller proposed fuel tank task force address? What issues would the controller's proposed fuel task force? So how do we fix it?
Well, again, I think it just has to do with getting reports of the transactions and reviewing those reports and finding out why those transactions are occurring. And
it seems pretty simple.
Yes.
You got a hose and there's gasoline. You got a vehicle and you put the hose in the tank and you fill it up. And you document what you're doing, mileage and vehicle. Relatively simple. Somehow it seems to be missing the connection. And if it's a motorcycle, they don't have a computer on the motorcycle, I understand. So they punch it in.
They can either use the override, or if they go to another city site, they actually would use a employee card. So the motorcycles do have cards, just because we can't put a VIT on a motorcycle.
They say that's not a Mastercard, that's an employee card.
Correct.
Okay. And has the LAPD completed its evaluation of a price quotation provided by the vendor to restrict the use of keypad override functions to emergency? So the LAPD going to complete its evaluation of a price quotation provided by the vendor to restrict the use of keypad override functions to emergency.
Vartan Yegian, Motor Transport Division, LAPD. Yes, we have looked at the quotations and their proposals. Currently, we believe it's too expensive. We can do it better, and we're asking them to rethink the method that they want to provide us the capability to enter the serial numbers of the officers. In fact, we're going to meet with them on Monday and then consequently on Thursday to go over some of the technicalities. But it is possible to make system upgrades in order to enable department employees, all active employees only, to enter their vehicle number, the mileage, and then consequently the serial number in order to be authorized to get fuel. As a contingency, we also have our 24 hours open shop. In case something doesn't work, our supervisor in that shop can override the system to get them fuel in case they have to.
Where's the 24-hour shop?
Central facilities.
Okay, that's the only 24-hour operation.
Right now, yes.
Okay. And do the department's monitors check out of vehicles? Do the department's monitor checking out of vehicles? Okay, the department's monitors check out of vehicles. Trying to understand this question. Checking out of vehicles. When they're checking out a vehicle, with the LAPD or something else, is there an automated system for the checking out, or is it just take the car and drive?
I can only speak for LAPD. 98% of the vehicles in LAPD are assigned to divisions or individuals. The only time that we have a pool of vehicles at downtown that they need to be checked out, and Motor Transport Division employees check the vehicles in and out every day and keep a log in our fleet management system and accurately control what goes in and out.
And that's being done correctly?
Correctly every day.
Controller, you have any problem with that?
No, we didn't have any problems with at LAPD.
Okay. Who'd you have problems with?
Some of the other departments, again, they had procedures.
Don't say some. Be specific, because if they're wrong, we're going to nail them. We're going to embarrass them.
Housing department, convention center, and fire department, they had policies and procedures whereby certain vehicles had to be checked out, and they were supposed to record those checkouts in a log, indicate, who checked it out, where they went to. But we found that they were not being consistently completed, and then the RAP did not have any type of logs for that purpose.
They just take the car and take off?
Well, I mean, I don't know. There were no logs. I mean, I'm not sure what procedures they had to actually get the keys to the vehicle.
Okay. As reckoned by the controller, did GSD consider penalizing the vendor as a result of system errors in the system?
We've taken the vendor to performance evaluations through our purchasing process. We've had some issues, but we've addressed them accordingly as they come up. It's somewhat difficult to try to penalize when you're trying to determine whether it's actually a equipment failure or a user input. So we have, in instances, taken the vendor through a performance evaluation.
How many vendors participate? How many vendors are there for this particular subject matter?
There's several, but because it's proprietary, we only have one.
How long is their contract?
We have an annual maintenance contract that expires in September 2012.
Are we doing a bid?
We have in the
RFP?
past tried to do a bid, but because of the proprietary nature of the equipment, we haven't had much participation by any other vendors.
What'd that system cost us?
About $6 million.
$6 million? And the controller reports $7 million missing.
Well,
So if we have a $6 million investment, you would not think we have $7 million missing.
well, just to clarify some of the $7 million, we have 1.2 million of that is bypass, 3.9 million is keypad entry, and 2 million are Mastercards. 3.9 million is what was dispensed out of a police station, because those are override. So in the likelihood, this is the police stations are a secure facility. It's premised on the officers are using the override accordingly. The 2 million in Mastercard, these Mastercards are issued to supervisors of the facility, so there is some authority at the site to use that Mastercard. Somebody just can't get the Mastercard and start using.
Except we haven't checked to see if they're still in the possession of the people supposed to have them.
Granted, that still needs to happen. And for the bypass transactions, over 50% of those are liquefied natural gas transactions that are exclusively to sanitation. So over half of those transactions are for vehicles that are that's for LNG, and that's and that fuel is at minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit. These vehicles are specialty vehicles, so they are accounted in the sense that we know what vehicles they're going to. And again, with a bypass, the controller's office did mention that you need to flip a switch in the fueling terminal, but that you need a key to open that fueling terminal, and that fueling terminal the key is assigned to a supervisor, just like the Mastercard, and they have to sign off for it. So there is authorization for each one of these at some level. You just can't walk off the street and just start pumping fuel.
Okay. And what is the dollar amount in staffing costs associated with the current fuel automation system?
In terms of our contractual costs, we pay about $500,000 annually for the maintenance of that fuel automation system.
$500,000, $500,000 to maintain it?
Yes.
Why so much?
The maintenance involves going out to each one of the facilities, making sure the fuel control terminal are operating accordingly. We do get communication issues sometimes that need to be dealt with. We have each one of the control modules needs to be looked at on the fueling nozzle because they do they're battery operated. They need to be changed. And system, just looking at the system overall to make sure it's working properly.
It seemed that when we had gas station attendants, the cost wasn't $500,000, where a person was employed to do that and keep track of it. So we went for automation, we have problems, and the people who had those jobs no longer have a job. Automation didn't really prove what it was supposed to. Have GSD explained the city's current fuel automation system? Have them explain it. I understand the system. Has new fuel automation system been considered? Explain the maintenance of the system. How much would the new system cost? Okay, so if we went to another system, has there been any review of something that's going to be better than what we have now and cost effective?
Right. The current system that we currently have is about 11 years old. So, in addition to some of the issues that we have with the system is just very old. So there are newer systems out there. What we've looked into at this point, a new system would cost about $7 million. That's the low side. Everything that you have at the fuel site right now, because the equipment is proprietary, would have to be scrapped, and you'd have to start all over. And that $7 million doesn't include the equipment on the vehicles, whether or not it would be compatible, which means we would have to go through and upgrade the equipment to go with a new system. So that hasn't stopped us from looking at other systems, though. And in fact, we'll be looking at a system probably in the next couple of weeks. We've made an appointment with a vendor, but we're always looking to see what's out on the market. The problem is, for us right now, is cost.
Right.
And one of the other things that we've looked at also is the fact that even with the issues that the controller has found, with the bypass transactions, the transactions that the controller has found that are not accounted for, with 2.1 million transactions, we still think that about 99.5% of every transaction that the city has completed for fuel is accounted for. So, then you start to have to try to add up how much, with that 0.5% that we're concerned about. And we believe that most of it is accounted for because we're talking about Keypad transactions, Mastercard transactions, and then the 11,000 bypass transactions, whether or not it's cost effective to put in a new system at this time, given the fact that we're at 99% documented. So, but again, that still has not stopped us from looking at other vendors to determine if there's something better out there that we can look at. But again, at this point, because the city's budget is so tight, we haven't requested funding for a new system, but we are looking at vendors, and it's something that we are considering.
And then what about taking down some of the 141 sites? We should look at that too, some consolidation with that. I know it was taken down originally, but maybe it's time to take some more down.
And we can take a look at that. One of the big concerns that we have are for, especially on the fire side, because they have about 63 of the sites, but they have requirements with respects to responding. And I don't know if Chief Earlett wants to speak to that.
Tony Perella, Shops Fleet Manager.
Councilman, we probably had this discussion before when it comes to consolidating the fuel sites. It posed a challenge for us. Right now, we're using the Voyager card more than we ever have. On the rescue side, not so much a heavy apparatus, but
Isn't the rescue diesel?
the rescues are diesel, yeah. But just because of the nature of the use of the rescues, and they go throughout the city, it's a challenge getting back to a city fuel site many times. So,
But you got stations everywhere.
we have, absolutely, we have 63 fueling stations, but they're not always in a convenient location for the rescues.
Or some-
Not an excuse, it's just a practical reality.
Are some of them still down? Because at one time, you had a number of sites that weren't even operating, like Burbank and...
We constantly have issues with the fuel sites. That's why I have a couple of concerns with the audit and the results, especially with E.J. Ward. There's a number of issues. I would say that all three fleet managers from PD, Fire, and General Services concurred that there are issues with E.J. Ward. The one department that seems to have solved many issues just because they put a lot of time and effort into it is LAPD, but we're not there yet.
Explain E.J. Ward to those who don't know.
Well, E.J. Ward is a vendor that supplies the system for the city of Los Angeles to monitor the fuel. It is they have their own cards, their card system, data system, fuel dispensing systems located throughout the city. And that's the system we use.
And you say that's not a good system? Or not
Well,
a great
I say we have some challenges with the system. I'm a great example. I have a VIT in my car, and I'm constantly having problems with it. And as Vartan from LAPD explained yesterday, there's constant issues with the system, wires coming loose, and it takes labor hours. And as you know, labor hours with fire and police and general services, all the departments, is an issue right now because of staffing cuts.
There was a problem with some of your stations that another one on Burbank, near the Kaiser Hospital, Burbank and DeSoto.
Right.
That site wasn't working.
We had to put a pod in there. And some of those sites where the systems go down and it's going to be a length of time, we actually deliver a pod from the shops.
What do you mean? What's a pod?
A pod carries 500 to 600 gallons of fuel,
So
and we actually dispense. Now, which pose a whole nother issue with the auditors, and I had to explain this. We fill the pods from the shops.
Is that station still not up? Burbank and DeSoto?
I have to check on that. I don't know right now.
It's been a long time since it was down. Do you know if that's...
Just to clarify, Councilman, I believe the sites that you are mentioning, I believe those come under the jurisdiction of the Prop F sites. These are new fire stations, and so those would be under the jurisdiction of Bureau of Engineering. They're the ones who put
Are
those
they
sites.
here? Bureau of Engineering here? We need to find that out, because when that place opened, that fuel site wasn't working.
I'll follow up on it. But back to the pods.
Yeah.
In documenting the use of the fuel pods, what we do is we had the old 181 form that the fire department used, name, number, shop number, gallon, suspense, all of that. That's what we would use. But we're finding that that's not satisfactory according to the audit. We need redundant systems built in. And we don't have a problem with that. We're working towards that. But till the fire department gets a VIT system fully installed, and we quite honestly are going to copy the LAPD system, because we can't afford the other vendor system. It's expensive.
Well, see, but I think with the fire department, it's a little different. You're on a site with other people. Public doesn't really have access to drive their car in.
Right.
Whereas other sites, where they're using regular fuel versus diesel.
Right.
I mean, I know where the fuel pumps are at the fire stations, and you always got firemen there, unless they're out of quarters and the place is locked up. It doesn't have the public access. Some of the, until recent, police stations didn't even have fences where the public could actually drive in. You know, they changed that to make them a little more secure. But it troubles when you think of the number, $7 million, and you start picking it apart on the different issues, and then you come up with other issues, as what you're relating to now.
No,
It's not just
absolutely.
the audit review. Now we got more problems than we started with because it's not working as it's supposed to.
Well, to be quite honest with you, I challenged the auditors on the $7 million piece because we have a big part of that. They're asking us, how do you justify a 1,700-gallon dispensing ticket? Well, okay, let's use, you want to use the Sayre fire, the Cessnon fire, the Merrick fire? Give me a fire, and I'll show you hundreds of gallons dispensed on one card or at one time. So we have those things. So I would say it's not so much the $7 million that is lost, it's unaccounted for. And we're to blame for some of that, for some of these issues, but it's not like we had $7 million stolen.
Right. That's what it sounded like originally.
Yeah, well, I want to make clear from the
Yeah,
fire
I'd like
side.
also to clarify,
It's not the
Siri
case.
also with the Controller's Office, that number is really representing what we're calling very high-risk transactions where there is not a definitive vehicle that we can prove where the fuel went.
Right.
So our recommendation is for user departments to really take that information, to use it as a monitoring tool, to be able to explain, was that a justifiable use of that fuel? Is there a 1,700 gallons dispensed for that vehicle? And the chief is saying they know exactly what that was for. We want there to be a process in place so department management can say, yes, this is a reasonable expectation and a use for this vehicle, for this amount, or it was not. But our audit found that really departments were not using the tools that they were made available through the Fuel Automation Report Center, and that's our
For the documentation. Chief, when the fire, the Sayre fire, the station fires you mentioned, when other apparatus arise from other jurisdictions, do we provide fuel for them, or do we charge them for fuel?
Yeah.
We have mutual aid, so if...
Right, mutual aid, and when they show up, we set up a base, and logistically, we have to support the mutual aid companies that come in.
Right.
But what we've done is we've gone back to that 181, the form, the 181, to account for the fuel used.
But we're not charging those departments to come and help us out.
No,
I mean,
we don't.
I'm trying to be
No.
realistic. If we're going to use 2,000 gallons of fuel for the diesel for the fire trucks from other jurisdictions, you know, we appreciate that they're here. It's going to charge back the fire department. We're not going to go send that department a bill, say, hey, by the way, there's your fuel bill.
But here's what we're going to do. We're going to put forward what they call an FMAG, which allows us to get 75% the cost of the fire, and we'll start charging for all those things that we utilized that was a cost to the city for that fire.
That comes back from another fund.
And you know what? You're not going to see that for a couple of years.
Yeah, but we don't charge that agency for coming to
No,
help us.
absolutely not.
I just wanted to make sure that was covered. Okay.
And Councilman, just to clarify that that particular fueling station that you say that was down, it's not related to the fuel automation system of it being down.
Right. It's just problems with the fuel. You know, if we went back to the horse and buggy, we wouldn't need to worry about this, right?
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen likely. Okay, so what I want to do on this item, because we have two together, we'll note and file the controller's audit and the department's reports. And do we need to bring anything back on this or send it forward? Huh? No, I know on this one. We're going to take the other one next. But I mean, is there anything else on this one that you have? Okay. So now we're continuing, because we now have the other section of this. And if the controller can then go into number 3, please.
Councilmember Zine.
Yes?
Hi, good afternoon.
Who are you?
Mary
Where'd you
Jane
pop in
Aquino.
from?
Well, the convention center was mentioned twice already.
It was.
Yes.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. I didn't know if anyone else was here, so
Yes,
go ahead.
we were here, and we just want to clarify what was the issues that pertain to the Los Angeles Convention Center.
Okay.
My name is Mary Jane Aquino, and I'm here with our building superintendent, Steve Poddick. And two of the instances where in the convention center as mentioned was in relation to the number of cards that were not accounted for. And we just want to clarify that those cards were in GSD OPS. Officers are actually stationed at the Los Angeles Convention Center. that...
So the cards were accounted for?
Yes, they were accounted for in the sense that they pertain to just the officers at the Los Angeles Convention Center, although it was the Los Angeles Convention who requested the cards for them.
Okay, so that's
Accounted for. And then in the second case wherein it was indicated that we were not keeping a close track of the comings and goings of the vehicles, even prior to this audit, we have actually for many years already accounted for the vehicle usage at the convention center. I think some of the instances wherein they said that the log was not completely filled out, we actually went through and looked at what was the information that was missing. And sometimes it's just the time that the vehicle was returned.
Wasn't complete.
It was not complete, or some probably in the various columns, maybe one or two might not be completed. But we have always kept track of the ins and outs of the vehicles at the Los Angeles Convention Center. Having said that, we do appreciate the controller's audit for the fuel use audit at the convention center, because I believe, or we believe as a convention center, that there's room for improvement, and that we do thank your committee also for highlighting the instances or opportunities for the convention center to do better. And so those are the things that we wanted to say, and we did not want us to be remiss in not pointing out those instances to this committee.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, just to clarify on that, I think on some of the logs, some of the information, I don't believe that they record like odometer readings on those logs, which would be a good idea to put the odometer readings onto those logs. So that was also missing.
They're probably not going too far from the convention center.
We don't know, because again, sometimes it doesn't say where they went all the time.
How many vehicles does the convention center have?
21.
21 vehicles?
Most of
Only 5 or 6 of those are off-road. The others are like golf carts at the
Yeah.
facilities.
And that's electrical?
Yeah. No, some are gas.
Some are gas?
Those are 21 are all gas. We have another like 90 electric.
Electric vehicles?
They just stay on the premises.
And OPS is your security operation?
Right. But since this audit, we've separated them from our fuel card inventory.
Okay, so it sounds like your numbers aren't as large as everybody else. Where do you folks fuel up?
We have our own fuel pump at our site,
Okay. Diesel and gas, or just gas?
both diesel and gas.
Okay. Does anybody else fill up there, or just?
Occasionally, an outside city department will come on site, but very rarely.
And they have a log they fill out, or they have the bid?
It could be either case, but since the audit, we've started monitoring on a monthly basis the fuel automation system reports, so we can identify, we're watching who's fueling up at our site, and we're watching all of our fuel cards if they're fueling up anywhere else around the city, which they rarely do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Controller, anything else on convention? Okay, thank you, Commissioner. How about, we heard from the fire department. Was there anything, Tony, anything else from the fire department? Because we also have the Housing Authority, LAPD.
Councilman, if I can, back to the Voyager issue. You entertained a concept of doing an annual release of new cards. So
Well, instead of every 2 years, do it annually.
Well, what I would like to propose, because that's going to pose issues for us, I'm sure it will for LAPD.
Why is that?
Well, what I'd like to do is do an annual audit to make sure the right people have the right cards and they're in the right places. Do that annually, and then just follow the system, and every 2 years, just go ahead and change out the cards, as is the current practice. We've been remiss on the annual audit. That's something we
I don't
need.
think you're the only one. I think everybody's going to be missed.
So we do an audit so we don't have to go through the card system. It's a challenge, and it's a challenge because of reduced staffing as well. So it's just a
When I
thought.
look at it realistically, and coming from 33 years in the police department and being here for 10 years and seeing how, we used to have the station attendants. We had a person who would be at the gas pumps, garage attendant, they'd
Right.
gas, they'd wash the windows, check under the hood.
Right.
That's gone now. We go to our own, I just go to any station I find available, mostly police stations and, get the gas and on my way. Just like years ago, when you went to get gas, you get an SH green stamp, blue chip stamp.
Right.
You remember those days?
Yeah, I got a bow and arrow when I was 6.
There you go.
Green stamped.
And that was now they give you all kinds of service.
Right.
And they check your tire pressure. Now you got to be, you just got to do it yourself. That's the way it is. But my only concern is that we respond to it to say we want to keep it honest, we want to keep it clean, because the headline shows nothing other than $7 million. And then everybody looks at us and says, here's another problem, because we got issues that come up, and every time it comes up, and when it shows negative, people start looking at us, elected officials, who's running the ship, and what are you doing to correct it? So I understand what you're saying. My concern is, what if they don't do the audit? What if they just have 106 stations, right?
I know you don't give them a choice.
Well, I know, but what happens if they don't do the audit? Then what do we do? I mean, we have some departments that haven't responded. Am I correct? Mr. Controller, Deputy, Assistant?
This particular audit, yes, I don't believe Recreation and Parks has submitted a action plan.
John Muckery's in hot water again. But, see, that's what I'm saying, is that we asked to do something, and if we look back and it's not done, that's the problem with the police department. They run a real tight regimentation. You don't do it, there's discipline. These other departments, like it's been testified, somebody was, putting gas in their own private vehicle. Well, you can't do that kind of thing.
Right.
So my concern is, how do we keep them honest and let the public know that we're doing a good checks and balance? And if the fire department does the audit and it's done properly,
right,
everything's fine. Is there a card for each truck or a card for each station? How's that work?
There's a master fuel card for each fueling site, and there's a card for each apparatus.
Okay, so you've got an engine, a truck,
and some pumps.
You could have sometimes 4 or 5 cards.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's the problem, if you got 4 or 5 at a site, and if the audit's not done, we end up in the same boat we are now.
Okay, this is they were talking about the Voyager cards, and I was talking about
Master Fuel Card.
Okay.
But you got Voyager cards too.
We have Voyager cards too. And that's
what I was addressing, was the Voyager cards.
Yes, and I was concerned that we'd have to change out those Voyager cards annually, and right now, with current staffing and some challenges that we have, it poses an issue. But we can hold our people accountable, and if we have issues holding the general managers accountable, that's a leadership issue and something we don't need to get into. But I'd call them on it. You're good at that.
Well, but my focus is not only the fire department, but we have, how many Voyager cards we have out? I'm asking to leave behind. Angela?
Police and fire actually oversee their own Voyager cards, so I'm not sure how many.
But for the city as a whole, how many do we?
For the city, just GSD, the ones that we're over is about 250, but with respect to police and fire, I'm not sure how many they have.
We're probably close to that.
That's 500, and then a couple hundred for you?
We have a couple hundred. 100 of them are in my office. I'm in control of 100 cards. They don't go out anywhere. That's for the emergency. The other 100 we actually believe 60 of them are disseminated among all the captains, mainly undercover operations. They control their cards. We audit them every month.
Every month?
Well, we audit their receipts every month. We receive them. And I'd like to also mention that the Voyager cards are recorded on our fleet management system. So we see every transaction. We see the vehicle got the fuel, where they got the fuel, and what credit card number was used. So all these tools are available to us. And I just want to make a comment on...
But see, you're using it, and how do we get everybody else to use it?
And that's what I wanted to make a comment on. Los Angeles Police Department, credit to my predecessors, have had put many years of work to have a comprehensive plan in managing the fuel transactions, because we believe not only fuel transactions are important for accountability and cost, but also it's a great tool for fleet management, because that's how you know what the cars do. So we're open to show anyone who wants to see how we manage our system. But I'd like to also qualify that it requires lots of labor. It's labor intensive. It requires lots of training. It requires supervisors' time. It requires a lot of repairs. Every month, about 2% of our transactions are error. Our supervisors have to look at the error, repair it, and we put about $10,000 of labor and parts in maintaining fuel transaction-related repairs in our police cars. So it's not only the cost of the facility, terminals, the wires, and the software, but it's also the components that are in the cars. And when you have a large fleet, close to 5,000 units, you have a lot of things that could go wrong. So these are the type of things that we need to qualify and include in our process of business plan when we look for new, renewed fuel transaction management system.
Are you the motor transport director?
Correct.
So you remember Don Brittenham?
Correct.
So you do what he did?
I'm sorry?
You do what he used to do?
I'd like to say I try to do what he used to do, and maybe somewhat different with the new technology.
Yeah, but he didn't have the technology back then.
No, he did not.
I remember him way back from the days of the PD. So you're doing monthly audits to check, to verify
Every transaction.
every transaction. Does General Services send out a list when someone's using the Voyager card? Monthly or bi-monthly or?
We actually send out a monthly report for the Voyager cards for all the departments that have Voyager cards,
So every department gets that? And then
if they have
depends-
Voyager cards.
Depends what they do with it.
Correct.
Did you get any feedback on that?
Occasionally, we get feedback on it, but for the most part, we send it out to the departments, and they, if there's an aberration, they will talk with their employee.
Okay.
And that was a new process that you began during the audit field work,
To take some action on it.
to send it to the accountable department, because previously, while we were out in field work, we found that the departments that were managing and overseeing the cards didn't have the detailed transaction data, so they really had no way to monitor their usage of the Voyager transaction.
So now that's been corrected?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I understand what the fire department's concern is, but if we issue it every 2 years, they still have to go through the process. Whether it's every year or every 2 years, they still have to go through that, get the new one out, get the old one in. How difficult is it to get those in and out?
Basically, we just give the departments a deadline, and they have to turn the cards in by then, and the cards are cut off after that deadline, so.
But how much effort is to get the new cards done? Is there a big expense and time and energy to get the
may I?
new cards done?
Okay. Normally, council member, it works like a credit card. When expiration date is near, actually the Voyager card personnel communicate with us, and we say send in so many cards, and we end up collecting the old ones. And sometimes we don't have to collect the old one because it's canceled, it's terminated, and they can't use it. So then we have to disseminate the new cards. But it does require labor, and it does require time. Therefore, 2 years is more, it's probably more feasible for nowadays than yearly. But the control is at the base when you look at the statements each month. That's where you control the cards. There are some cards that are dormant. They don't use it as much. There are some cards that are being used every day.
They shouldn't be using it every day.
Well, if they're undercover.
Well, there are some units that have to use it every day, like motorcycles.
Okay.
So
So if we include the audit, a timely audit that's done, and then continue with the 2-year distribution, but they a mandatory audit, then who would they report that to make sure it's done? See, my concern is we demand it be done, it's not done, then we end up with the same boat next time we come up with another audit for the fuel. What I'm trying to do is plug this hole so we don't have this problem again. So next time it's like you do the audit, things are good. Everything's on documentation, we don't have any problems. You know, I've never seen an audit come by that says everything's good. There's always flaws. So I'm trying to get to that goal.
For
And we'll give someone a
GSD,
gold star.
for the GSD cards, we can do that. We can send something out and tell them to audit and give them a deadline date to report back to reconcile the cards.
Okay. Can we do that for the fire department?
Yes, sir.
How long are you going to be around before you retire? See? That's why he wanted 2 years. He didn't have to deal with it. See, a cop is slicker than a fireman this time. Okay. All right, let's try the audit and see if that'll work. So we got GSD, you can take care of that. Fire department can take care of that. Convention center, you can take care of that? Yes. And then, how about the PD? You take care of that? You do it all the way?
we're already doing it, and we would appreciate any guidance on that. We'll adjust our policies if it's needed.
No, we
We'll
appreciate
continue.
that. That makes it a lot better for everybody. Because I don't want to see more negative, because every time a story comes out, that's negative, people start losing their confidence in government, and that troubles me greatly.
With all respect, if I may add, because we are the lion's share of using unleaded fuel, while we have found positive results from the audit, we have made significant improvements on some policies that we had. We also need to look at the audit period when they were looking at the transactions. This was at the heart of ERIP and furlough days when almost every city department was dazed with all the financial issues. So not having enough employees to do the core functions, it becomes very difficult to be accountable for every step. However, we look for the opportunity to improve, whether it's through technology or through training or policy making. We can do that.
Because it was 09 to 11. I think ERIP came after. Was it
ERIP
10?
started in 2008, I believe, 2009. Yes. In 2009, I believe.
Time's going back.
And then we had a furlough for
Okay, how about Housing Department? Are you here?
No, I'm here for sanitation.
Okay, what about Housing, Sanitation, and Recs?
You know, the Councilman Zine.
Come on up, Recs and Parks, Sanitation, Housing. Go ahead.
Alex Hello, Bureau of Sanitation. The Bureau of Sanitation was not part of the audit, yet we were mentioned on page 3 of it saying that the LNG was not being documented. What I'd like to point out is that nobody checked with us, nobody asked the Bureau of Sanitation about how the LNG was being used or how the sanitation keeps document. So we do have, on a daily basis, we have dedicated fuelers that go through 3 days of training, and we do keep records since 1999 with the LNG. Every truck, how much, what's the odometer, what's the temperature, what's the pressure on the vehicle, if it needs to be vented, and we also document how many miles per gallon, because that's really how we find out how the vehicle is performing. We also keep track of the tanks. At the yards, we have 15,000 gallons LNG tanks. We have to maintain them at certain temperature and pressure. And I have some documentation, so...
How come the audit showed problems with sanitation?
I wish they asked us. The first time I heard about the audit was the LA Times calling, asking for clarification, and KCBS and ABC News asking us about it.
Don't forget NBC4. Let's give fair reference.
Yeah, I don't know. They didn't call me, but maybe they called somebody else. But I just wanted to let you know we do document every single day dedicated fuelers, because the LNG is at minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit. Remember from our science class in high school, if you put anything, let's say a banana in nitrogen, you put it on the table, it smacks, opens. Right. So we have to wear special gloves, eye protection.
Okay, I understand that. But how come the controller? Go ahead. On the response to this.
As far as our background information, we presented what our database queries over the Fuel Automation Center reported. We focused on the 5 departments as we described as far as looking at the controls. The clarification was added to our background at the request of GSD, who pointed out that a large proportion of these bypass transactions was in fact LNG that was dispensed through sanitation, because they felt that it had a lower risk as far as a bypass transaction, because it was maybe less predisposed towards theft for personal vehicles. We put that in as far as a clarification issue to report it for what is the overall citywide issue. However, the larger issue remains is anytime you've got a bypass transaction, you don't have a specific vehicle or piece of equipment that is directly tied to that transaction, and that's the bigger issue that we're trying to get at.
That's the key. Okay.
Unfortunately, if they asked us, we would have given them the documents.
But do you have a computer that documents as it's dispensed, the CNG?
Basically, the LNG, Councilman, is the one we document.
I know, manually, or is it in a computer?
It's if the ETA award system is not working. Actually, whether working or not, we document it by writing. And then it's entered into the computer database that we have established.
But that's not what they found.
They haven't asked us, but I mean, I know what. And again, our trucks have to fuel every single day, right, because just in case of the earthquakes or something. So every truck is fueled every night by dedicated fuelers. Right. and they go through, again, 3 days of training. They have to wear the right safety equipment, and the dispensing pressure from the tank, I don't want to go too technical, but because of a thermal expansion, it can only go from the LNG tank to a smaller vessel that's rated to be able to take up to 220 psi. You cannot just dispense it into regular vehicle.
No, I understand. I understand exactly. I'm just trying to figure out where it didn't connect with the audit. That's my concern, because what you're saying, it should have showed that everything was in order.
If they asked us.
Well, we did not have any recommendations directed toward sanitation. If you go to our control matrix on page...
No, it didn't show recommendation, but it did show there was a problem on sanitation.
Well, as Siri indicated, it was mainly for background information. It didn't say...
Yeah, but the background information converts to a headline, which converts to their embarrassment, which converts to us trying to analyze and correct it. So while it may appear innocuous, to them it's a serious issue because now they're on the hot seat.
Yep.
That's the issue. But I would not think that many people would be driving their personal vehicles into sanitation because of the fuel that you folks use. It just, it's like if you use unleaded versus premium, that's pretty close. This is a far cry. You're not going to be able to put this in a car.
Exactly.
That's the difference. And most of your employees don't have vehicles that use that kind of fuel anyway. So I would look at that honestly, realistically, to say maybe there was some kind of a communications that could have improved, but not that there was anything erroneous with sanitation.
Thank you.
So you do your own audits then, right? On a daily basis?
On a daily basis, we track the LNG consumption, and the temperature and the pressure on the tanks.
Okay.
Because it's important to us to know if the tank's sweating, which means basically need to be repaired or not to be repaired.
You get that done at the yard?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
How about LAHD? And then we'll hear from Rex and Parks. And then we'll go to the next letter.
Councilman Rennie Gardner with the Housing Department. The department is grateful for the controller's audit. As a result of the analysis, we've tightened up our policies and procedures.
You have a lot of problems in that department. You know that?
We're the Housing Department, sir, not
You're in the headline all the time.
Not the Housing Authority. I want to make that
Oh,
clear.
you're the Housing Department.
Housing Department.
You should change your name.
We do housing. It's hard to change our name.
So many people think a department, authority, they connect it all the time.
It is true.
Authority's getting the bad rap, but because you say housing, you kind of get the bad rap just by association of housing.
Well, we're proud of our mission and we're proud of the work that we do, but the name is problematic.
Housing Authority, Housing Department, Police Department, Fire Department.
The Housing Department has 10 vehicles, 9 of which are VIT equipped. We don't have any Mastercards or Voyager cards. We were not using the fuel usage report on a regular basis as a result of the audit we're currently doing. We were using it on an ad hoc basis. There was one vehicle that had problems with the log keeping, so that's been tightened up as well. So we're pretty simple, I think.
So you were a minor player in this whole scheme. Any complaints on the department?
No, again, the department was very receptive toward the recommendation and began implementing them right away.
Yes, we did. All right. Thank you.
And you have 10 cars?
Yes, sir.
So you don't have a big fleet?
No, not at all. Soon to be reduced to 8 as a result of the GSD fleet audit.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Rex and Parks. Where's Mr. Muckery?
He's in hot water.
Yeah, I was kidding.
Just so he will get out of hot water. We were so busy working on the recommendations, we will be submitting a report shortly to the controller. I will. I know he appreciates it,
I was
especially
with him
from you.
yesterday at a park opening, so.
I just want to clarify a couple of things. I think that I brought one of my assistants over my equipment. His name is Rob Simonovich with me. We do appreciate, we always agree that there's improvement needed. I think a couple of things that were said maybe were a little not quite accurate. As to pool vehicles, most of our vehicles are actually assigned to individuals and or shops. We have 5 or 6, 7 maybe vehicles that are at our Figueroa Plaza that we do check out, and of course, we'll be happy to log those in and out. And actually, we have designated people to check those in and out.
How many vehicles do you have in the fleet?
932.
932?
Right. And as you know, I think it's been said at our budget meetings, and we've recently have a routing system for our maintenance, so we need vehicles to keep people on the move, since we don't necessarily station them anymore at just one place, and hopefully we're gaining some efficiencies by that. Also, I think there was a couple of things that I'm not sure that something was said about the going to using the Voyager card as opposed to using a fuel site. We did check into that. It just so happens that for the person to use the Voyager card probably is less expensive, because where they are located at, they'd have to go all the way to the city of Burbank or something to try to think. That was Bob Davis, right?
It was a CNG vehicle.
Yeah, it was a CNG vehicle, and it just happens to be they'd have to drive way out of their way to go to the city fuel site, as opposed to using a Voyager card. And then also we had some issues that were related using CNG for our boats down in the museum. But I think, again, we appreciate...
Did you say boats?
Yeah, at the aquarium, down by the aquarium, using the aquariums. But I think we do appreciate, but I think in most cases, I'm going to agree with GSD and some of the other people that in 99.5% of the case, we were able to account for most of the discrepancies that were brought to our attention.
Okay, we want to make sure that, like Lexus, we strive for perfection. We're never going to achieve it, but we're striving for it.
And that's why we totally agree. There's always improvement needed, and I think we already are working on everything just to make sure. But we are a participant in the biweekly meetings with GSD. Rob goes himself. Roy Norris sends his assistant. And we do have used whatever reports are provided to us by GSD.
Because I know that I see Rex and Parks vehicles all over the place. Those yellow vehicles. You got 700 some facilities?
We have at least 400 parks and probably 400 or more types of facilities. Yes.
800, that's a lot. I see those. I don't know how they maintain it, but they do.
We're working every day real hard.
The shrinking budget. Any issues on the Rex and Parks?
No. Yeah, again, I think Rec and Parks took the recommendations that we observed during the fieldwork stage and began to implement that, and so that's a good report.
Solves that problem. Okay, great. Thank you very, very much. Say hello to Mr. John for me.
I will.
Let him know I was picking on him, too. I don't want him to get too comfortable. Okay, so now we can note and file the controller's audit and department reports on that item, and we're going to move to the next one. Mr. Clerk.
Would that be item number 3 then? Are we as combined, or are we?
You did introduce it.
I did introduce it previously.
So let's go to number 3.
Okay, then we're on to number 3. It's a motion signed Wesson relative directing the GSD to report in regard to fuel use, to include a plan to strictly oversee fuel use monitoring, implementing fuel card controls, maintaining logs of vehicle use, requiring additional user information to dispense fuel, the creation of a fuel task force with appropriate departments to develop guidelines for fuel use, and a review of the Voyager card program and the accessibility of Mastercards at each fuel use station, and to recommend improvements.
Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. Look at this group is shrinking. All right. We're tapping to the controller. Oh, this is GSD.
This is the same item, just your motion.
Yeah, the GSD is going to report city department. Okay. So, take it away.
I think, Councilman, many of the issues were covered in the previous item, but we just want to reiterate that GSD is in agreement with the recommendations made in the controller's audit, since it recommends better documentation and monitoring by the users department, which will ultimately strengthen and improve oversight of fuel use. GSD has been proactive in implementing the audit recommendations, with some of the recommendations having been already implemented. While GSD has no authority over other user departments' fleet operations and fuel usage, GSD remains committed to providing the resources to the user departments in their efforts to control and monitor their fuel use.
Very true. And we did discuss all those issues. We just want to make sure that the money we're spending, which is an incredible amount of taxpayers' money that can go for all kinds of other services and issues, that we do it in the proper arena and have it properly documented. So what we want to do with this, various city departments have autonomy over their fuel usage, maintain, keep their own records. Every department is left to upload their information in the system, led to duplicate transactions, non-existent vehicle numbers, negative mile transactions, reasonable mile transaction system should be able to track the information. However, the system is susceptible to high human error and system malfunction. Good time to begin discussion to look at the feasibility of consolidating city fuel systems. New systems out there that are web-based could achieve some cost savings. Likelihood need to be phased out because it cannot be implemented overnight. And what we want to do is instruct the CAO GSD to report back on the feasibility of upgrading the current fuel automated system and or a new coordinated and consolidated fuel system that would ensure efficiency in monitoring fuel usage. So if you can work with the CAO and GSD, and you talked about coming up with some new RFPs, whatever works, because if we're looking at making it accurate, we need to make it accurate and have the confidence. And we talk about transparent government. People see the audit makes it look like things aren't going good. We all get in that same negative environment, which we're trying to avoid. So you can report back, and it will take obviously a while to get this done since you're already moving forward with the review anyway, to see what we can do to tighten up the rules. So when a follow-up audit is conducted, it's like, whoa, we changed it and it's working well. Because you're in a tough spot because you have to purchase it, they use it. It's just like we have all these lights on. Do we need all these lights on? Probably not. We could be saving electricity because you see every switch has this conserve energy, and here we are. Even the plugs in the wall have conserve energy. Be a green angel, and here we're not being green angels. So we need to practice what we preach, right? Because you want a pay raise, don't you? No, you just want to get your paycheck next Wednesday. Don't care about
like
pay
to get
raise. Paycheck. Okay, so with that, we will send that forward for that, and then it'll come back to this committee. How long do we want? Paul?
How much you need? 60 days?
90, 60? What do you
60.
60 days?
90 days.
Okay, so we'll have this report back on number 3 in 60 days.
Sir, may we have 90 days?
90 days.
Thank you.
You're not going to retire soon, are you? You're not going to follow Tony out the door, are you?
No.
Okay, because the bottom line is, they look at it, the city of Los Angeles, whether it's the fire, the police, or whatever, it's the city of LA, and when the story's done, it's the city of LA that's doing something good or bad. They don't care if it's GSD or convention center or fire, it's just the city of Los Angeles, and that's what we're trying to do, is change that to make it work for everybody. I thank you both.
Thank you.
And thank you all for that. So that's number 3.
Now it's item number 4.
4, take it away.
Item number 4, continued from January 10, 2012. Office of Finance and Police Commission reports relative to the feasibility requiring installation of revenue control equipment at all Police Commission permitted auto parks.
Yes.
City Attorney to report relative to the legal possibilities of requiring all parking lot operators to obtain a bond for each location and related matters. This item has also been referred to the Transportation Committee.
All right. Come on down. Holy smoke. We got public comments, and we can do the public comments first, or we can do them second. What's the will of the people? You want to go first or second, Greg? All right. So let's start with Dr. Molly Rhodes and Kashinian and Spiker, and then we'll take David Thomas, and that's 4 chairs, right? And then Ivan Valley will come after that, and then the other folks. All right, so let's start with the doctor.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Molly Rhodes. I'm a research analyst with the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, Local 721, and I'm here on behalf of the Coalition of LA City Unions. The parking occupancy transit tax ordinance is very important to the coalition, as it's a key place where we might be able to raise revenues, since there are scofflaws currently who evade giving the taxes to the city that they collect from the consumer. So this is an area that's very important to us. We're hoping that an ordinance gets fast-tracked, as there's a suggestion in the mayor's proposed budget about moving an ordinance. And we recommend that the Transportation Committee waive consideration so that this issue can move forward quickly. And in terms of the staff recommendations that are before you, I'd be interested to hear what the city attorney has to say about the bonds. Our interest is that the rogue operators be forced to comply and pay, and we do think the best way for that to happen is for there to be a policy that covers all auto parks, because otherwise the rogue operators will just play a shell game and change their incorporations and roll over, so to continue avoiding handing over the taxes that are due to the city that they've collected. So, thank you.
Thank you. And our next one is Yehig. Pronounce that name. You got an unusual name.
I do. Yerik Keshishan.
Good Armenian.
I am. I try to be.
God bless you. All right. Well, I can tell. The IAN.
You got it. Well, good afternoon, Councilmember Zine.
Good afternoon.
Yerik Keshishan with the Central City Association, representing the 450 members, which collectively employ over 350,000 individuals throughout the city. CCA supports the City of Los Angeles in trying to collect on the tax revenues it is owed. However, speaking on behalf of our members, we believe there are already tools at the city's disposal to help collect its parking taxes. Tools which would not require the mandatory installation of automated revenue control equipment and credit card readers on all of its city auto parks. Should the city adopt a one-size-fits-all approach, the effects on the ongoing revitalization of downtown could be profound, especially at the site of our smaller surface parking lots. Our concern is that these smaller lots may be forced to close down altogether, which in turn would create dead spots on our streets and encourage blight and crime. We ask that you continue to work with the parking industry to develop a meaningful solution that will not unnecessarily raise cost on the parking rates. It is the property owners who ultimately bear the cost of installing this equipment. They should continue to be part of the ongoing discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Spiker.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Zine. Greg Spiker, Kent Spiker and Associates, representing the Los Angeles Parking Association.
Why is it Ken Spiker and Associates? Why isn't it Greg Spiker and so? Why is it always your brother gets the head?
No, it's my dad.
Oh, God bless.
Ken Spiker Jr.
All right. So we'll give it to your dad, not your brother.
That's correct.
All right, I want to make sure we got the proper order here.
We're on the same page.
All right.
On behalf of our association, which operate about 75% of the parking lots here in the city of Los Angeles and pay about 80% of the parking occupancy tax, we appreciate the opportunity to be before you again. I would like to point out you have several speaker cards in front of you, council member, many from our association, and I would respectfully request in the spirit of brevity here that we've designated a kind of a single spokesman, because we're really here as a unified force here and feel about the same on this issue. So if it's possible to grant Mr. Damas here a couple extra minutes, we would greatly appreciate that on behalf of our group.
Your time. Okay, so if he wants to speak on behalf of Gary Gower, Gary?
They're all here. We have representatives.
I just want to make sure he's going to speak on your behalf?
Yes, he is.
And then Jeff Griswold?
Yes.
He's going to speak on your behalf? And how about Carrie Wolk? Maybe not. Okay, so.
Not that he's not on my behalf, but I might.
Well, okay, we'll let you speak then. David And then we have Ivan Valley,
Yes.
speak on your behalf, and then Richard Dane? Dane?
I'm going to say I want David too.
Huh?
Stepped out for a second.
Oh, he is? Okay. So why don't we do that, 2468, so we'll let you go ahead, finish, and then we'll take these other
Okay,
folks.
just very briefly, we, as you know, we were here at the January 10th meeting. We have met with your staff since then, also submitted a letter to you on March 7th, which put forth some recommendations, practical recommendations we think to help the city achieve it. I know your desire to collect the delinquent parking taxes that are out there. Our members are, we believe, the legitimate operators out there. They're paying their fair share. But we are fully supportive of the city's efforts and your efforts to try to collect the money that's outstanding to the city. We've made some, as I said, some concrete recommendations in terms of some auditing standards, some two-part ticket system and so forth that is not in place today that we think would go a long ways to solving the problem or help enforce the problem, which you really think that when you get down to it, it's about enforcement. We understand the city has limitations with respect to personnel and so forth, but the bottom line, enforcement is what is necessary here. So again, thank you for your time and appreciate your staff's effort in working with us on this issue.
Okay. David?
Councilmember Zine, thank you. My name is David Damas with System Property. I want to take a step back quickly, and I won't take all the time allotted, but the entire local parking industry is under siege on a lot of levels. We are faced with a potential 50% increase in the parking tax. We have an increase in the downtown center bid assessment tax for the property owners. There's another proposal for the LA streetcar, which would be an additional tax assessment, and then there's this ordinance before you. And I think there's a frustration amongst the community, the parking community that has been downtown for decades, that we are being painted with the same brush as what's been known as scofflaws or bad actors, which clearly isn't the case. After the January meeting, with your blessing, we basically formed the Los Angeles Parking Association and the CCA got together with two publicly traded parking companies, AMCO, System Parking, and Standard Parking, along with 10 other local operators, some of them national, which is really unique, council member, for us to get together, and we've come up with identifying the root problem for transparency and for collection, and giving you, via this memorandum, a win-win for the city and for us. It would expedite and make clear and transparent auditing procedures. We advocate a minimum, these are two-part tickets, which currently there is no requirement for any tickets to be issued. These are done in sequential number and timed and date stamped, which makes for clear and easy audits. You don't need a machine to do this. And so we think we've really come up with 3 points, that there's consistency and transparency with uniform minimum audit standards that clearly don't exist now. Second, we think with equipment, there's an evolution in revenue control equipment from iPhones, et cetera, and you can't have a one-size-fits-all approach. Last, we think that there are great existing enforcement mechanisms that, as was pointed out in the January meeting, were just started in December of 2010 to go after the bad actors. We know who they are, you know who they are, and the enforcement mechanisms have been a clear deterrent. Next, I would say that, we're all victims of this together, whether it's the city, the property owners, or the operators. And we've developed these best practices, but we're concerned that it's rare that you see the private sector band together and agree to regulate itself. And we are concerned that those recommendations will not be heard, that people who are not in the industry, who aren't subject to Sarbanes-Oxley like a publicly traded company would, who have to report, who have to have transparency, are trying to impose regulations that just don't make sense in certain situations. So our group clearly wishes that your committee would seriously consider adopting the recommendations in our proposal. We're happy to work with you with doing so. We think that bonds and other things already exist, and if you're not willing to enforce existing laws, additional regulations aren't going to do the trick. But we think this gives you a uniform, fast way to collect in an audit that currently doesn't exist, and we think we can build a better system for both the operator, the city, and property owners. So with that, we urge you to consider what we've put together for you.
Thank you. Carrie Wolf? And then Richard Dane, you back?
He has.
Huh?
Yeah, he's here.
He's here. Richard Dane, and then Carrie, come on forward, both of you. Don't be shy, Richard Dane. Where are you? Are you going to pass? Okay. All right. We knew you were out, so we wanted to make sure you had the opportunity. You're welcome.
I don't want to keep beating the same dead horse, but I just wanted to say that we do know that there's bad apples in our industry, and they're the exception, not the rule, and we want to help you have them follow the rules. But compelling the use of equipment, even if it's just to the scofflaws, is going to, I think, give the city a sense of false security. I think, with all due respect, we just sat through an hour listening to a system that was in place for gas with equipment and automation, and it maybe wasn't working so well. And it's the same point that would be taken with having the equipment on the parking lots. The equipment is only as good as the people that are watching it and operating it, and the scofflaws are going to figure out ways to go around it. I think that we have 90% of the revenue, 10% to you. We've developed these ways of protecting our revenue, and as David said, we do want to share that with you. The tools are there, and I was hoping that we could, I don't know if this is the forum for it, but to suggest a committee meeting with the police commission, the parking operators, and the Office of Finance to help them help us and help you. So that's, if that's a possibility, maybe some good could come out of that.
Anything's possible.
Okay.
All right. Well, let me, if the Mr. T. Fank and the Office of Finance come forward.
City attorney.
Any city attorney? Where's the city attorney? City attorney? Okay, so let me explain how this all came about. I found out that the city is owed conservatively $23 million from parking lots that haven't paid the 10% tax that's already imposed. And when I heard about increasing that to 15%, my response was, we're not even collecting 10%, how are we going to collect the 15%? And then we started doing some research into it, $23 million, and then what happens is, you talk about the bad apples, the scofflaws, whatever the case may be, these folks know how to play the game, and what they do is they transfer ownership, the lot stays in business, but it changes name, they play this back and forth game, and then they try to settle with the city attorney. Instead of paying us $3 million, they'll pay us $1.5 million, so they're making out like bandits. And then it's just gotten worse over time. And then we met with Mr. T. Fank, the Office of Finance Treasurer, city attorney, said, how do we tighten this up? Because going to my law enforcement background, they're collecting money on behalf of the people of Los Angeles and holding that money. To me, they're committing a crime by doing that. They're holding money that belongs to the taxpayers as the tax. And my attitude is, they're stealing money, so we should go put them all in jail. Well, that didn't go over real well, but that would be my approach. Mr. T. Fank, it's been a long time since you made an arrest, but you and I can go out there and do that. So then I drive down to Staples Center one night, and I see the parking lot, and not a lot of people, and it's $10. And as I get closer to the Staples Center, I see the sign changing to $15 to $25. So what we find is the parking lots that are around here, they start at a certain number, and as the lots fill, they go to a higher number. Now, if someone wants to pay $10 or $15 or $25, that's their choice. I don't care how much they charge. But what troubles me is we're not even getting paid on the $10 tax, leave alone the $25 tax. And I know it's a cash business where people go in that lot, they pay cash, very, very few, if any, take a check or a credit card. So these people are basically ripping off the taxpayers. There is a 10% tax. They're collecting that when they collect that parking fee, and they're holding that for years at a time. And then our city attorney tries to go through the process, which takes forever to get things done because that's the bureaucratic system that we live in. No disrespect to what they've tried to do. And this has just gotten to the point where I'm saying it's absurd. And there's obviously good folks out there who run legitimate operations, but the guy who's getting paid $8 or $9 an hour to collect the cash, I'm sure he's not turning in all the cash he's collecting, because I know how they reissue tickets. And the whole thing has been a scam for a long, long time. And it seems that the bad apples, like the taxi industry, we got bandit tax, and Mr. Spiker knows about the bandit taxi cabs. They go out there and they rip off the public. These folks are doing the same thing. So what we're trying to do is come up with a plan, a system that says this is what the fee is, and this is what you're going to pay. But when they're changing those signs, and you can go down any time and you'll see it goes from $10 up to $25. As the lot fills, the price gets higher. And then you ask yourself, are they paying us the 10% on the $10? Are they paying us the 10% of $25? Or are they paying us anything? That's the problem. And it's just gotten worse over time. So what we need to do is collect that revenue that's ours. I mean, they are actually taking the taxpayers' money and holding it, and then they'll try and cut a deal. Well, we're going to get maybe a quarter of what they owe us. I said, this is absurd. Now, our city attorney recently went to a hotel they weren't paying, and he put the deputy sheriffs in there collecting the revenues and collected a couple $1 million. And they paid their debt. That was a downtown hotel? Wilshire Hotel. They were delinquent in paying. City attorney came up with this brilliant idea, put deputy sheriffs out there collecting. As the money came in, they were there collecting the money. Now, we don't want to get to that extreme point, and I don't want to be anti-business or hurt CCA or this, but the bottom line is we have a huge deficit. We need to provide services, and this is not like these folks are giving us a gift. This is a tax that is there, and I think it's not really appropriate to add another 5% to the tax. We're not even collecting. If we were to collect the 10%, we would be maybe $50 million closer to adjusting our budget. That's the concern I have. And then we can't put the ideas of the business tax and the property tax and the this, whatever that we did with Mr. T. Fank in the clerk's office, and you remember the business tax and the license tax, the police commission permit, because they weren't talking to each other, and now we've got that. So what we're trying to do, honestly, is the good people we don't want to hurt. The bad people, they go out of business, I don't care. But my goal is to collect the money that's due us. And this 10% tax has been there for a long, long time. They're not trying to impose something new. We're just saying this is what it is. And if I had my choice, I'd go out there and put them all in jail that are ripping off the city. But Mr. T. Fank doesn't want to do that. So we want to start with, and the Treasurer of Finance, I mean, they have to collect. They don't have the resources to go out and collect it, and people aren't paying. So that's where we're at. So we don't want to be the bad guy to beat the legitimate people over the head. But this whole automated process that we're looking at, how do we get compliance? And as been mentioned, we have the system about dispensing fuel. We got problems with that. But this is hardcore money that we need to bring into the pot. So who wants to begin? That's the platform. You take it away. You see my frustration is boiling over.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Ed Cabrera, Assistant Director, Office of Finance. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Richard T. Fank from the Los Angeles Police Commission, as well as Beverly Cook and P.J. Shemtu from City Attorney, as well as your staff, Adrian Garcia and Bernard, for working with us on advancing the recommendations that Finance has proposed. And just as a backdrop, Chair, you referenced the hotel issue. That identification of tax was identified by Office of Finance staff through the performance of an audit. So we did identify what was due to the city. And again, what was relevant to that particular tax that connects directly to the parking occupancy tax is that it's a user's tax. It's not a tax on the parking lot operators. The tax for that hotel was not a tax on the hotel. It was tax revenue collected from the occupants of the hotel, just as the operators, the parking lots collect tax from the users of the parking spaces. So that is trust fund money that is collected on behalf of the city that is not being remitted to the city. Finance has taken action dating back to the early 2000s on this issue, and we have worked successfully and continue to work successfully with the City Attorney's Office as well as CID and Mr. T. Fank's staff. One item that was mentioned
regarding outreach and education in terms of the audit process. Finance actually did meet with the Parking Association back in, I want to say 2004, 2005, and we're more than willing to meet once again to educate the association and their members about the audit practices and requirements and the type of documentation that is needed, and hopefully that education will spur cooperation from all of the association's members as well as other operators that may not be members. But the bottom line is, as you accurately painted the picture, this is a cash business, and therefore it is very easy to circumvent the constraints of the ordinance. And what Finance has proposed are tools that we believe are essential and necessary to ensure the timely and accurate collection of the tax. The fact of the matter is that it is not solely an audit issue. A lot of the operators refuse to cooperate with an audit. A lot of the operators refuse to allow either finance employees or the contractor from the parking network, their employees, to conduct the audits. They fail to provide information, they fail to cooperate, which is why, in addition to the two measures that we've previously proposed in terms of the bond requirement and the permanent revenue control equipment, we also have been in discussions with City Attorney and CID on other recommendations, including requiring cooperation in the audit process as a condition for maintaining the police permit, the auto park permit. With regards to the specific recommendations, we wholeheartedly believe that the bond requirement is essential, and I believe a statement was made that there currently is a bond requirement. That's a misstatement. There is a bond requirement for public safety purposes. There is not a bond requirement for the collection of delinquent parking occupancy tax. So that is an essential component that we believe is necessary. The research that we've conducted in tandem with the city attorney liaisons to finance basically has looked at the model utilized by the city county of San Francisco, which does have a mandatory parking occupancy tax bond requirement for all operators, not just scufflaws. The requirement is essential because it puts the city ahead of the game in terms of collecting from any operator who subsequently becomes delinquent. And what we've seen in many situations are operators that once they become delinquent, either shut down, they change the entity formation, they hand off the business to a relative, to other related parties, in an attempt to avoid any collection activity, any judgments, and so forth. So the bond requirement puts the city ahead of the game and provides a necessary tool for collection. With regards to the permanent revenue control equipment, the Office of Finance views that also as a necessary component. Our recommendation is that the permanent revenue control equipment be applied to those that are scufflaws, not to all operators, but to those operators that are scufflaws. Another statement that was made earlier in public comment was the fact of potential impact on the surface lots. Well, as a point of fact, many of the surface lots are the lots that pose the biggest problem. There is a lack of control either at the attendant level or at the level of higher officers within the entities, and the surface lots pose one of the major problems. Another point of fact is that many of the lots currently, the parking facilities currently do have permanent revenue control equipment. Essentially, if you're looking at, let's say, downtown Los Angeles, major buildings, Century City, other major locations. So a lot of lots already have permanent revenue control equipment. Office of Finance has worked cooperatively with the other parties at the table. One area that we do respectively disagree with my colleague, Mr. Tefang, is the proposal to apply an option of allowing an operator to install or to utilize portable revenue control equipment. The fact is, whether it's portable revenue control equipment or the tickets that were displayed earlier, again, that leaves it completely up to the discretion of the attendant or the principal of the company to ensure that those tickets would be issued, which again, it creates the illusion of compliance. There's no guarantee that the tickets will be issued. That's the problem right now. Many operators, when we do gain access to their records, have no control over their own ticketing process. 10 cars can enter and tickets can be issued to 3 or 4, if that. So again, we wholeheartedly believe that permanent revenue control equipment will serve as a deterrent, number one, and also for those operators that are scufflaws, it will provide essential audit documentation that would allow us to go in and look and determine what the correct liability is. What other misconception is the fact that because an operator is paying, they're paying correctly and they're remitting the full amount. That's a misconception. The fact is that many operators, once they're audited, we determine that they owe additional tax through the audit process. And again, that's where the bond comes in. If they fail to pay after their due process where they can request a hearing, they can contest the liability. Once that liability becomes final, the bond provides us with the opportunity to collect, and the permanent revenue control equipment provides a deterrent and an audit process if a scufflaw continues in operation. So we wholeheartedly believe that these two components, as well as additional recommendations that we will be making to City Attorney and to your office, as well as CID, are necessary to move the city forward in collecting and successfully ensuring compliance with the parking ordinance. One final statement that I would like to make is that, to be very clear, the bond requirement and the revenue control equipment proposals do not expand the scope of the parking occupancy tax. In other words, any current business that's in existence or any new business that would operate a parking facility would continue to be subject to the POT. Office of Finance nor City Attorney or CID has any intention of expanding the scope of the parking occupancy tax ordinance to businesses that are not subject to it currently. So I just want to make that perfectly clear.
Thank you. Thank you. I know it's been frustrating for you, for your department, as well as a lot of us with this issue. City Attorney. You've been challenging this for a long time.
Yes. Beverly Cook, Assistant City Attorney. Just to reiterate and to echo what Ed Cabrera has stated from Office of Finance, one of the things that I wanted to point out was the $23 million that you mentioned in outstanding parking occupancy tax. Our group has filed. We have filed lawsuits, and obviously it's the time-consuming and laborious task of going through the legal proceedings. And in many instances, some of the parking operators really propose a challenge. There have been a number of instances, or at least one instance, where we have had keepers placed on the lots. And the cleverness with which those operators respond to that has been almost amazing. And we have sheriffs out there manning those lots. But in attempting to collect even through a keeper has been difficult. It's unlike the transient occupancy tax in a hotel where you're primarily relying on credit card transactions. It's one structure, generally speaking, and so it's pretty fixed. If you have the parking lots, especially the surface lots, where you have multiple lots, you have multiple operators. We've had people asked to collect after they've gone in and they don't pay the keeper, or you have had them move the box and the keys, and they take the keys in an alley and park somewhere else so that they're not parking at the lots that we have placed the keepers in. So that's the difficulty. And in addition to Office of Finance's proposals, one of the difficulties that we have witnessed is you do have a number of operators coming in, and you have an entity that really has no assets.
And so they can change a name because they don't have any real liability. The threat of bankruptcy or them filing bankruptcy, they'll threaten us with it, but they don't do it because they don't care. They simply change their names because they have no assets. So we're proposing adding some language that will restrict their ability to transfer to a successor and place some limitations there, and also to include some language so that there's liability that goes up the line. Because when they incorporate, obviously they shield themselves from individual liability, and what we need to be able to do is get to those individuals. So those were some of the difficulties that we have, but we have filed all of the lawsuits that we possibly can. It just takes time, and then the question of enforcement. At the end of the day, who's going to be there if we receive a judgment to enforce that judgment against?
Do they know how to play it?
They do.
And just to add to Beverly's comments, both of these recommendations, both the bond and the equipment, are already in place in the city of San Francisco. So it's not like we're innovating anything here. Most of our recommendations are modeled over a city, the next largest city in the state of California, that has found success with these very recommendations. And I can personally attest to the frustrations that we've had in collecting these taxes, even when we've already proved to a judge that there is liability. We received a $4.5 million judgment against one of these debtors, but when it comes to recovering on that judgment without a bond, without any real assets, chances are very slim.
And there's not just one or two, there's a number of them, and it may continue as they find loopholes in the system. Just like if you sent, I didn't know that we sent the sheriffs out, but they find a way to avoid that, to elude that.
We have, I can say that we have several that are out there and that are readily identified. And as Ed mentioned, there could be others because most of them will know to pay some amount. The question is, are they paying the correct amount?
Just keep them off our back for a while.
That's correct.
Mr. T. Fank, a man of great prestige and law enforcement career.
Good afternoon, Councilman. CID, through the Police Commission, is the permitting entity for auto parks, as you know. And our role in that permitting process over the past several years, we've expanded our interface with Office of Finance. I'd like to talk about the process we have now and then address some of the other issues that have been raised. An application comes in for a auto park permit or a renewal for an auto park permit. We require a variety of paperwork. We receive all that paperwork, but one of the key pieces of that is we will interact with the Office of Finance staff to determine if there is any outstanding parking occupancy tax for that individual operator or other lots that that operator might have. Let's just say they're XYZ Auto Park Inc., and they have 10 lots and they want to make number 11. We'll see if those other 10 lots have any outstanding POT before we consider issuing them number 11 on their auto park permits. So we have through that process reduced the number of operators who come in with a liability that in the past that system was not in place. Also, for the past 3 years, I believe, there has been an ordinance that upon a auto park having a liability, the auditing piece being completed, the Office of Finance completing their administrative appeal processes, they then forward to the Police Commission and their subsidiary panel, the Police Permit Review Panel, a recommendation for revocation and or suspension of an auto park permit for fees due. We have to date, I believe, processed 21 of those. We have some of those have settled as they've gotten to that point, and Office of Finance has worked a settlement agreement, accepted some revenues or some in full, but some of those have not all been revoked. We have revoked a number of those. All of those that have been revoked have not been granted reapplication. Either they have not applied, or even there, we had a recent incident, which I'll not talk about the company by name, where they were revoked, and we had another individual coming in to say that they were applying for those lots, that they had purchased shares, et cetera. And as we sat down and had a face-to-face interview, the individual just took their materials and said, I just don't want to apply, I'll walk away. They left because they were clearly a shell company. So we are very aggressive now in the process of ensuring that an applicant is a viable applicant, that they're not trying to be a shell company, as we can operate within the ability of the law that we have to deal with. If they come in as a separate LLC and they pass all the muster, then it becomes more difficult. But we have not had that situation arise yet. So I believe in the last year and a half to 2 years, we've done a much better job on our end preventing the scofflaw, shall we say, from coming in to operate.
Now, do we have some posted? I think we talked about something at that site to show that they're licensed and that.
Yes, we do. They have the city seal that is there.
They do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
The other piece that we do, in Commission Investigation Division, I have an enforcement arm. As you know, we enforce over 50-some-odd permits in the city of Los Angeles. I have 2 officers who spend a majority of their time on parking lot enforcement. They know the lots that have permits. They know the lots that don't have permits. If they see a lot operating without a permit, they will go. They will contact that operator of the lot, who usually is an individual who's being paid a minimum wage amount of money, if that much, who's taking the money. Somebody's coming by every hour or so, taking the cash that they get. So if we make an arrest on that individual for operating without a permit, we're just arresting the individual who's taking money. We're not getting to the operator. So we attempt to get to the operator through working with that individual to see if they will tell us who their boss is. Sometimes they know, sometimes they know. Sometimes they're being paid cash for their hourly rate. They're not even given a check. But we do arrest individuals, and we probably make, I'm going to say, 6 arrests a week. Our field enforcement officers do for those kind of violations to go after the operators that do not have the permits. Where we run into the difficulties, and I think the frustration that Office of Finance has and that you clearly have shared with us over the many times we've been before you, is those individuals who are permitted, who collect the money in trust for the city of Los Angeles, and who fail to remit the money. And that process that it takes to get them to basically shut them down can take several months. And at the end of the day, if we do shut them down, we're left with nothing.
Right.
So they have been able to continue to operate even though they have owed the city money until we're able to take them to the police permit review panel and revoke their permit. Then we can shut them down. So they've absconded with the money that they owed us to get to that point and the money that they've been able to collect since they were put on notice until they get to the police permit review panel. That's why I think the bond piece comes into play. We have 2 issues, I think, here before us. One is for the city to get its money, and second, for the city to get its right amount of money.
Right.
So the city getting the money gets accomplished through the bond piece. Getting the right amount of money gets accomplished through revenue control equipment. And I clearly am aware of the financial impact to the industry. I clearly am aware of the financial impact of property owners who lease property to individuals who want to run an auto park. But I think at the end of the day, we're left with limited options if we want to get the accurate amount of money. We can go to the ticket system, as we've all said before. Tickets are just as good as people issuing them. Revenue control equipment, can it be bypassed? Yes, but it certainly is a better control equipment piece than the tickets. I think that if we were to say, at least in my opinion, having been through this piece, the critical piece here is the bond, because it ensures the city is made whole by getting its money. And if we're aggressive on focusing on the bad operators, do inspections to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do, and remitting their monies with which I believe is every 30 days. Is that correct? If they're remitting within every 30 days, then they're in compliance. Well, on day 31, when do we consider them delinquent? On day 31? On day 60? On day 90? I submit they're delinquent on day 31. Yeah. And we need to be aggressive going after them on the day they're delinquent to get them to pay. And I don't know if there's penalties accrued with that or not, but those would be the other ways that I believe that we're able to get individuals that operate to pay their monies on a regular basis to the city so the city is whole.
And how do we collect if it's $10 at 6 o'clock and it's $25 at 8 o'clock?
Well, again, it gets back to the ability of the operator to be honest at the end of the day. We don't know, because they do have the ability to have fluctuating rates. The ordinance allows that, as long as they give those rates to the police commission, and most of the operators are very good about that. We know in Hollywood there's fluctuating rates. We know, like right now with the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Kings in playoffs, there's a lot of money being made in auto parks downtown because of that escalating rate. We know that. But how can we assure that they're paying at the $50 parking rate or the $10 parking rate? There's no way that we can ensure that in our end, and I think that's part of what you heard, Ed, also. It is a cash business. That's why in our report that we offered up a suggestion that one of the other options is credit card or debit card. Some of the lots that have unattended equipment, you go to LA Live parking garage, you have to go to a machine. You do it all with a machine. You use your credit card, your debit card. There's no individual involved in that. You get a printed ticket, you go to the exit, you put the printed ticket in, that's how you get out. That's a good auditing device and a good accounting piece. All the lots don't have that, and I'm not suggesting all the lots have to go to that, but if we want to make sure we're getting all of our monies, really the only way to do that, I believe, is through automated parking equipment. So it comes to choices. It comes to the policy decision of you and your colleagues of do we want to crawl before we walk or run? But we need to do something to ensure that the city is getting its revenue.
And it's been a long time in coming. We've been dealing with this for a long time. How many years have you been dealing with the city attorney's office?
We filed over 400 cases in 2008, 2007, 2008, so it's really been ramped up over the last four or 5 years or so.
You probably wonder, does anybody ever care?
Right.
I care.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to say, if you want to form a working group with the industry, I'd certainly be more than willing to participate and do that to work with the industry, as Mr. Cabrera also said he would do.
Well, I have a number of questions, but I think to expedite, how many operators are delinquent, the amount of unpaid property tax revenue, renew permits, et cetera. There's a whole number of questions, but I think to expedite and move this forward, what I'd like to do is this. Following recommendations: request the city attorney with the cooperation of the Office of Finance to report to the council with a draft ordinance to amend the municipal code to require all auto park operators to post a bond to satisfy delinquent parking and occupancy tax. So require all auto park operators to post a bond. Request city attorney assistance of finance to prepare and present an ordinance stating that any auto park that has any delinquent taxes or any unregistered or unpermitted auto park be required to install revenue control equipment having the ability to accept credit, debit cards, and monthly parking as a condition to grant a permit. Suspend auto park permit upon finding of withholding of funds, of preventing city auditors from inspecting, auditing parking activity, and hold suspension until specified conditions are met. And to and additional instruction for Office of Finance, which is not part of the formal action, but an instruction coming from the chair of this committee to report to the LA Parking Association to work with the LA Parking Association in improving the auditing process and best practices for enhanced parking tax collection. So we have the Office of Finance, which is the department that collects the dollars, work with the LA Parking Association, which we have represented here, on improving the auditing process and best practices to enhance parking tax collection. So it gives you an open opportunity if you want to come up with something that will assist in this endeavor, because I'm determined to get something done so we can finally accomplish what our goal is. And the mayor's budget is requesting a doubling the property transfer tax and increasing the parking from 10 to 15%. And my concern is property transfer tax is one issue that affects homeowners that are selling and buying property. The other is the lots and the people who are paying. And I know that the Dodger Stadium, I heard Magic Johnson saying that they were going to lower by $10, which means they're lowering of $10, and if that team excels and does well and it's a sellout, we're going to be losing money. Because when they're charging $10 more, obviously now they're lowering the rate. That actually is going to hurt the city finances. Paul, do you have anything else on this?
That sounds good.
So I think what we do, we give you folks an opportunity to work with the association. We get something done. We come to council. We finally come to a resolution. And I don't know if the legitimate folks want to go out and beat those people over the head and buy the parking lots from them. That might be an opportunity. But as far as LA Live expanding, if we get an NFL team down here, parking lots are generating a lot of revenue. And I know that the cash opportunity is there. I don't know how much they pay an operator, but it's probably not a whole lot. But whoever owns that property is making some good bucks. And if we don't get tight on it, which we've been I wouldn't say negligent, it's just been we've trusted people. And I equate this to the same thing with the public transit system, where you have the orange line, the blue line, the green line, where MTA is now realizing that the honor system doesn't work. They're now starting to put in gates that they have in New York and other parts of the world. When you get on public transit, you have to get a ticket and go through a gate. The way we do it, you get on there, buy a ticket up to the honesty, and they're losing millions of dollars. I mean, people are hopefully born to be honest, but unfortunately, some don't, and it affects us all. So anything else, Adrian? We got this covered?
Oh, it was a chief committee, yes.
Huh?
It was the chief committee, yes.
Yeah, it'll go to transportation, and Mr. Rosendahl, I believe, is on transportation. So with that, Mr. Clerk, that'll be the direction on this matter. Anything else from the folks up here?
Chair, if I may, just one comment and then one clarification.
Sure.
With regards to a statement that was made that the city shouldn't look at a one-size-fits-all solution, when it comes to permanent revenue control equipment, again, using the city county of San Francisco as a model, their ordinance with regards to permanent revenue control equipment does set different parameters based on the size of the lot. So, again, certainly as Office of Finance works with City Attorney and CID on the revenue control equipment aspect, we would not imagine that a small surface lot of X number of spaces would be asked to install the same type of permanent revenue control equipment as a much larger lot. So, you know, again, we're not looking at a one-size-fits-all. Okay. We're looking at something that is viable, but also does create not just the illusion, but the reality of control and ensuring that the city is doing all it can to enforce the regulations. The other thing, just clarification, in your instructions, in terms of working with city attorney on revenue control equipment.
Well, no, work with the LA Parking Association, Mr. Spiker, his group, on improving the auditing process and best practices for enhanced parking tax collection. So it leaves it wide open. You folks can come up with hopefully some plans that will be acceptable to the city and to them. So we're leaving the door open to work with them. The parking association, and if there's anyone else in the parking association, Greg, let me know, because you folks will be working together. As the city attorney puts this ordinance together, I want to make sure that we do something that's going to work. I don't want to burden, but we got to do something better than what we're doing, because what we're doing is not working.
Well, certainly, as I stated in my opening, that Office of Finance is more than willing to sit down and meet with the association to discuss our audit practices, what best audit practices are to ensure that audits can be conducted as expeditiously and efficiently as possible. We realize that businesses are there to conduct business. However, we do rely on businesses, since it is a self-reported tax, to provide information to us that's necessary for us to arrive at our findings and to verify the amounts that are being reported to finance. But the one clarification with respect to your instruction to city attorney on the revenue control equipment,
yes.
Are we looking specifically at permanent revenue control equipment, or is there some clarification there?
Up to you folks to come up with.
Thank you.
Because you are going to be meeting with them to come up with the plan. If it was up to me, I'd put a police officer at the gate and collect the money and turn it at the end to watch. And that way, everybody would pay the right amount of money and everybody would be fine. But we don't have enough police officers for that. Well, wait a minute. We got one officer here. He could have put GSD up there. No, it's just so frustrating to see the good operators get victimized by the bad operators to take advantage of the taxpayers, and for us not to have the funds to do the services that we need for the people of Los Angeles. I mean, it's just, government is so inefficient sometimes, and the bureaucracy and the red tape, and what you have to do when you go to court to deal with this, I mean, it's outrageous, and they're just ripping people off like crazy. It's you don't realize it until you get involved in it. It's like, you see that swimming pool? Is it warm? Is it hot? Is it cold? And you jump in and it's freezing? You want to test the water first? Well, we test the water. It's not working. So this gives an opportunity. When are we going to have this up to the next committee? Okay, so it'll be scheduled, so within a reasonable amount of time, if you can come up with that and pull it all together. And the legitimate folks that are here, we appeal to you to help make this work for everybody, your own operations and everyone else. I mean, you go to a supermarket, we don't have that problem. You go to a restaurant, we don't have that problem. But it's this whole cash deal that seems to be the huge problem. And we're not going to do away with them. And we are a car-friendly environment, so we need to make sure that we get the revenues. And we're like $200+ million short of this next budget. And the mayor's proposal is to increase the citation fines for traffic violation, for parking violations, red zones, fire zones, et cetera. And there's controversy about that. We can't just keep jacking up fines and fees when we've got money that's owed to us, righteously owed to us, and we're not collecting it. That is the sad part. And then, as you know, the city attorney's office deals with it, and they find a loophole. Even when they go to jail, they find a loophole. So with that, Mr. Clerk, staff, we're done?
That's it.
Thank you all.